All right, hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be making the Death Star with procedural nodes and as little modeling as possible. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can also join now and get access to some cool perks. You can check that out. Check out the Patreon as well, where you can get access to all the uncut live streams and all the project files, and everything's over there. So it's really, really worth your time. So have a look at that. The goal with this tutorial is to talk about how we can use procedural nodes to make some really intricate stuff. Our goal is to make the Death Star 2, so the one that's kind of under construction, right, from Return of the Jedi. And we're going to do all that sort of construction stuff and try and make all that happen with nothing but procedural nodes. So it's going to be really cool. Hope you're excited. Buckle up. Let's do it. And I'm going to start off by making just a UV sphere. So I'm going to go Mesh, UV sphere. I'll scale it up a little bit. I'll also go ahead and get a camera in place in my scene. So I've got something to look through in a consistent view. So I'll just lock my camera to view and I'll just pick a nice little frame. Doesn't matter too much at the moment. And I'll do my usual cinematic 2:3:5 ratio. So I'll go 1080 times 2.35. Now, the first thing that we want to do is we need to understand that with the Death Star, there's specific patterning that goes on across its surface. And it's easy to think that, well, what I have found the trap of was thinking I could just create some just generic procedural square patterning, and it would just work if I used a generated texture node or like the object texture input and placed it on there. But it doesn't actually. It's actually really important that we use UVs to make this work. That's really the main way that I figured out to do it, is to use the UV coordinate system. I want to demonstrate this first real quick. So I'm going to split my viewer. And I'm going to come over here to my shader editor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my sphere. I'll go ahead and call this the Death Star. And I'll go over here to my shader, create a new shader. When you have just like a straight up material. So let's see. I'll just grab a Verona, and I'll just do this to demonstrate what's going on here, because I want you guys to understand this. I'm going to switch to Manhattan because that gives us a square-like pattern. And I'm going to pipe this into the emission. I'll go ahead and turn on rendered view, and I will get, let's see, a color ramp. Go, and I'm going to drag this up just to kind of, make it a bit firmer for us so that we can really see what's happening. In fact, I might even make this constant, and I'll drag this out. And I'm going to grab a mapping node. Again, I want to just take the time to do this because I think that it's important to explain what I'm about to do. We've got these like square panels, and what happens is they move towards the pole, so the top of the sphere and the bottom of the sphere. You can see they get smaller as they go, and they kind of wrap down to the bottom. It's a very distinct look, okay? Now, if we want to get that look, we need to be able to effectively control the shape of our grid system so that it fits in that space. I could probably demonstrate this better with a brick texture. So let me just, or even a grid, was it checker? Yeah, checker texture. I'll grab a checker texture instead. We can have a look at that. Okay, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to show you. So you could see we get these weird like overlapping concentric circles. And that's because we're using the generated texture coordinate method to try and place this checker texture on the sphere. And you can see it's not placing it in a way that looks like the Death Star. Okay, a Death Star doesn't have these concentric circle things going on. Now we could try like object, right? But it's going to be the same kind of thing. It's trying to use the UV coordinates of the object in such a way that it can just like, position for us. But anyways, we're not getting the control we want. However, with this sphere, the default layout for the UVs of the sphere, I'll just open up our UV editor. I'll go into edit mode and I'll select all. You can see that so with all the default sort of generic objects, mesh objects in Blender, they're already unwrapped for us. So if we had a cube, the UVs are already unwrapped. This sphere, the UVs are unwrapped in a way that works well. And you can see what it's done is it's actually cut all the UVs up here at the pole. All these UVs like this, they've all been cut. And it's laid out all of these guys in a grid where everything's the same size, the same proportional size. So now watch, if I use the UV, okay, as my texture coordinate, suddenly now things are lined up correctly, okay? And this is essential for getting this specific shape in this texture, right? We need things laid out in this grid format, because now look, I can like take all these guys and I can scale them on the Y, you know, and like scale it on the X and get this kind of like lined shape that we really want to see for our Death Star. Okay. So that's the first concept I wanted to get across. Okay. I'm going to undo all that. And I'll just get rid of my UV editor for a moment. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is we're going to be making the eye of the Death Star, which is that, you know, that central eye shape right here, this thing. Now, in order to punch a hole in our circular geometry and get this eye to work properly, we need to model it first off. We can't really use a bool or anything like that because we're not going to get a nice clean edge. So we're going to model it in. But in order to model it, we also want to model it in a way that's not going to really affect the UVs such that we get a seam or that things break up near it. And this is actually a real big challenge when using UVs. In order to help us do that, I want to get a nice smooth sphere. So I want to use a subdivision surface, but I don't want to leave it on. If you leave your subdivision surface on and we kind of model with this like lower polygon count, the subdivision surface is always going to kind of warp those UVs a little bit, especially around this seam that we're going to create to make this eye. And you can get a tearing effect. So to avoid that tearing effect, I actually want to apply my subdivision surface. So I'm working just with mesh and not any modifiers. So let's do that now, okay? So, and let's see, I'm gonna take my object here, I'm gonna add in the subdivision surface modifier, and I'm just gonna do one subdivision. And I'm gonna click right here in this little drop-down menu and click apply. Okay, so now we've got a lot more mesh, okay? I'm also gonna right-click and shade smooth. Now I get a nice smooth contour around my circle, which is really the main goal of why I would use a subdivision surface there. But now also, more importantly, if I open up my UVs, let's have a look at those. You can see now we've still got this nice clean grid, but we've got like twice as much geometry. So everything's working properly. All right, now let's go ahead and plan out our object. So I'm gonna jump back into my camera view just to have a look at where I wanna place the eye. And one thing that I wanna do is I want to avoid doing any geometry, I don't want to have this eye intersect our trench, right? Because the trench line is gonna be where we make the Death Star trench. I'm gonna take my brush selection tool. I'm going to go to face mode and I'm going to select, let's see, just those four right there. And then I'm going to Control plus to expand my selection. I also want to make sure I've got an even number of edges. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is work. So I've got, it's divisible by 2. That's important for making this circle work, this trick that we're going to do. I'm going to delete these faces. Okay, so I'm going to hit X, delete faces. Then I'm going to go to edge mode and I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm just going to click right there on one of these edges and that's going to select this loop for us. Okay. And now what I want to do is hit Shift D to duplicate and then I'm going to scale it down just a little bit like this. And then I'm going to hit F3 and I'm going to type to sphere. And this is the handy little trick. You can use this to sphere transform to basically turn any set of vertices into a sphere shape. All right, now when we do this, you're gonna see that we get like this deformation because it's trying to actually turn it into a sphere. It's not just turn it into a circle. And we don't want that. So let's hit S to scale. Actually, let's switch I'll turn on my little widget here so we can see the direction of our control. And I'm going to switch from global to normal. And normal is the direction that the points are facing. So the points are all facing in this direction. So if I go to my scale widget now, what I can do is I can scale along the Z here. I can just scale down. If I let go, it's going to give me this little drop down menu and I can just specify exactly what I want. So I actually want Z to be 0. And that means it's going to completely flatten all of those edges together, all those vertices together on the Z direction in the normal direction. All that stuff is working together. All right, so I'm going to drag this out a little bit so it's kind of in line with the flow of everything, and I think that's going to work out pretty well. Now we could go into even more detail and like project this onto a surface of a sphere to get that exact curve, but I'm not so worried about it. I don't think it's going to matter for us. Now, because we have the same number of edges for both this circle and this outer square, what I can do now is I can hit F3 and I can type in grid fill. or no, sorry, not grid fill. We want to use it's bridge edge loops. That's what it's called. Again, I'm using the F3 menu because I don't remember all the hotkeys. It's a really handy thing to remember. You can just hit F3 and type in whatever it is you're looking for if you can't remember something. And it's good. It's fuzzy search terms, so you don't have to be exact. You don't have to spell it right. You can kind of type it and not have it quite right, and it's going to work for you. So really, really, really good. All right, so we're going to go bridge edge loops. Bam, and that's going to bridge those edge loops. And that works well, remember, because we've got the same number of edges, because we actually just duplicated those edges and scaled them and turned them into a circle. So that's a really great trick for how do you model in a circular shape into something that's maybe not circular to begin with. Now I'm going to select this loop by holding down Alt and clicking on one of those edges. You'll select that whole ring of edges. What we're going to do is we're going to hit E to extrude, and we're going to scale down and just bring it in a little bit like this. E again, scale it down. E again, scale it down. I'm trying to make these like kind of even. Actually, I try and like kind of getting smaller as we go. All right, so now we've got the eye shape. Now we need to push this shape in. So in order to do that, we can keep our handles set on the normal direction. We can keep that center group of edges selected, right there. And now what we can do is I can turn on proportional editing and switch this, instead of smooth, switch it to sphere. And now we're going to be able to proportionally move all of these things, all these edges together in a sphere shape inward in the Z direction on the normal. So if I grab the blue handle here and grab that and start to slide, you can see I get this circle here. You may not see it. So if you don't see it, it just means it's too big for your view. So you just scroll up on the mouse wheel like that until it's just affecting these sort of these circles specifically. So we don't want to affect anything beyond this group. So I'm just going to drag that in a bit. And so we've got that curved bowl shape. Now we're raised up a little bit. So I'm going to select this edge and I'm going to turn off proportional editing, and I'll drag this one in just till this looks a little bit flatter. Now I need to make an edge loop to start to clean up this mess. Okay. So I'm going to Control R and I'm going to come right here and I'm going to bring this right up to there. And that just cleans up my edge a little bit. I'm starting to think a double edge loop. Yeah, that's all we needed, is a double edge loop. Now we can see the edges. Okay, so this is an argument for possibly still using a subdivision surface. It's going to make it nice and crisp and clean, but it is going to potentially affect our UVs. So it's debatable. We can leave it on for now and maybe see how it plays out. This is potentially all the modeling we need to do for this Death Star. Okay, we can achieve everything else with our materials and with shaders. All right, we're going to go into our shader now and start doing some shader magic. I'll turn on rendered view and I'll go ahead and get a light in my scene. I'll create a sun lamp and just rotate it off like this. And I might shift E to duplicate, rotate this one around to the other side and just kind of offset it a bit like that. And then I'll turn the power down of this one just to kind of hit it a touch there. And this one I might turn up a little bit. This is kind of the classic lighting for the Death Star. You can see there's always this kind of like bright side and dark side. Light side and dark side. I never thought about that. Okay, we can go ahead and let's go ahead and set the mood as well and create some space. And I'll just grab a noise texture and a texture coordinate and a color ramp. Pop this here, factor into that. Take this, pop this into the background. Grab this over here, drag this up to boost our contrast. Take my scale up to about 600. Bring this down, this down. Maybe 10 on the strength and maybe 1,000 for my stars. It's pretty good. Now let's go back to object shader mode. Okay, so let's start figuring this out. First thing we need to do is get the paneling laid out, okay? So let's create a texture coordinate node, because remember we need to grab our UVs. And let's grab a Voronoi, one of my favorites, the Voronoi. We're gonna switch to Manhattan because it gives us that nice squared shape that we can work with. And I'm also gonna grab a mapping node, put them in between, and let's hook it all up. So we're gonna go UV to the vector, vector to the vector, And let's grab a color ramp as usual, distance into the factor, and color into the, well, we'll just talk about what we're doing first. Now, I have activated Node Wrangler. I'll let that sink in for a second. If you want to activate Node Wrangler, you come over here, Preferences, Add-ons, type in Node, and tick that little box. It will work. With Node Wrangler turned on, I can just show you quickly and easily what different things look like. So Control-Shift and clicking on any node lets you look at that node specifically. Okay, so I'm going to drag this up a bit. And we're just looking at this. So what it does is it creates this node called a viewer, but it's just an emission shader. So it's the same as if you created an emission shader and plug things in there. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to rotate our Voronoi on the Z 45 degrees, and that lines it up so it's now boxy and square-like. And I might bring my scale up so we've got a bit more to look at. Okay, so you can see using our UVs, we're getting that direction towards the pole like we wanted, okay? It's looking really good. I'm going to switch this even to constant. Okay, so now we can really see we've got all these little boxes going on. Okay, now we've got some problems here in this area, but don't worry, we're gonna fix that up. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to take my scale and I'm going to just drop my scale down. I'm going to hold down Shift to slow down the speed, and I'm just going to bring this around to like 0.2, and I might bring this up to something like this, maybe, because we get these like panels. This is sort of the style of the Death Star, is these panels that go up like that. Okay, so in order to fix up this area here, let's have a look at what's happening. If I turn off my subdivision surface, we can really see a bit clearer. All right, so it's basically when we created this little extra circle bit, we really kind of screwed up the UVs. They don't line up in that perfect grid anymore. So in order to fix that, what we want to do is come right over here. I'm gonna go into face mode, into edit mode, and I'm going to hold down Alt and click on one of these edges, and that'll select this loop of faces, which is our problem area. Okay, we're not thinking about this interior section yet. We're just looking at this problem zone. And I'm going to split my view, and we're going to come over to the UV editor. All right. Now you can see if I hit A to select all, it's going to show me all my views. You can see what's happened. We had this section here with these UVs, and now they're all stretching down to this single point. It's very confused about what's happening. Now, if I just select these guys, I can now unwrap just this group, and we can try and position it so that it sort of disguises the fact that we've got this problem. So I don't have any distortion in this. I'm actually just going to use project from view, but I'm going to hit 5 on my number keypad to switch into orthographic mode. So now there's no perspective in my view. It's just straight. It's just a straight, no depth to it. Nothing's getting smaller as it goes away from camera. I'm going to come over here to UV, and I'm just going to go project from view. Boom. All right. So now I've got this thing here, which now is exactly, it looks exactly like what we've got here. If we switch to this mode, UV sync selection, what this means is it means that whenever I select a polygon face over here, it'll select the corresponding UV over here. So it also gives me the ability to see all of my unselected UVs, which is what I want. Because what I'm going to do now with this group selected is I'm going to scale them down, and I'm going to bring them over to this little gap. I'm going to try and rotate it up, and just kind of place it in here. And I'm going to look at this and see kind of, can I get these guys to line up a bit better? So I might see scale on the X to fill this zone just a little bit more. And it's okay if they don't line up perfectly. It's not going to be perfect. You can get it pretty perfect if you like really tweak these things a lot, but I'm not going to, because of the tutorial, just the amount of time that it would take. It's a bit fiddly, and I think it's gonna disguise itself pretty well once we get everything going. So I'll leave it like this for now. We might need to come in and change these a little bit more. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to come over to my little sphere thing, and I can turn on my subdivision surface again. You can see with the subdivision surface we're getting that tearing. You can see that how it's like when I turn it on, they sort of warp a bit. This is why I was thinking we probably shouldn't use a subdivision surface. I'm going to see if we can get away without using it, and as we add our materials and stuff. So I'm also going to select this guy. I'm going to Control Plus to expand my selection, and we're just going to select the eye. And I'm actually going to separate this out to a separate piece of geometry. So I'm going to hit P, and separate by selection. Okay, so now I've got two objects. I've got Death Star and Death Star.01. And so 01 is now just this interior bit. So we can actually use this now to, I think this should help us. Like I should be able to go subdivision surface on this one. And that's going to round out this one. And allow us to not round out the other one. And it could work. This may not be a good idea, but I'm not going to mess with the scale or anything just yet. Gives us some options down the track. Either way, it helps break things up and gives us a bit of a sharper edge there where we want to have that as a separate object. Okay, so for this one now, if I go into edit mode for our other one and I select all these guys, I can leave the same material on, okay? But I'm going to do my UVs a little differently for this one. So they're not unwrapped at all. They're actually all right down in there in this little dot. That's where all my UVs are hiding. I could go UV unwrap, right? It's going to try and unwrap it, and it does a pretty good job. But it's not going to give me something that looks like what I want. So have a look at the Death Star again. You can see the Death Star, again, it's that concentric circles going in towards a pole, a center pole, which this time the pole is the center, the eye, right? We need to figure out how to get that to happen. What I found worked just the simplest, the most straightforward way was actually just to unwrap this by using the light map pack. Now, I'll just click OK on that. So what light map pack does is it's a way of interacting with game engines. Now, if you've watched my tutorial series, The Bounty Hunter's Den, we've talked a lot about this there. So if you haven't seen that, maybe go check that out. And what we want to do is it breaks out each single polygon face and it separates all of them and it just lays them out for you and fills the space as best as possible. So everything's kind of oriented differently. Each face is perfectly square, and it gives us this kind of a look. So you can see now all of the different faces are oriented in different directions. But what we can do now is we can take this, we can scale it on the Y, right? And it's going to stretch out that material in a way that starts looking like this center eye bit, right? You can see that we're getting these circles and stuff. You can see the geometry, like the way I extruded it and extruded it again. That's actually now played into creating these breakup rings in this by using this kind of UV unwrap method. So pretty cool, and it works pretty well. So I hope that makes sense. Again, let me know if none of this stuff makes sense or you're having questions. Throw them in chat, put them in the comments, in the video below if you're not watching this live, and I'll do my best to answer. Yeah, I could save and name objects as time culture, but I mean, that's so conventional. Everyone saves their projects. Like, live on the edge, man. That's, So we've got our panels, right? And we may need to tweak these a little bit, but I think this is going to be pretty good. Let's go ahead and plug this into our color, and I'm just going to reconnect this up to the surface. So remember, material output, you take the BSDF and send it through to the surface. And what I want to do is, let's see, I'll move these guys out, and I will take the black and I'm going to move it up to like a light gray. And I'll take this white and move it down to a light gray, kind of bring these guys just so they're pretty close. Very Death Star kind of color scheme there. We do have a little bit of an issue here with our UV, but we can fix that once we get all the other materials in place. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to introduce a lot more variation and textures. So you can see there's a lot of density in these squares. There's a lot of like techno stuff going on. So the way we can achieve that is to grab, we're going to grab another Voronoi, and we're going to do the double Voronoi trick. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate all these guys and bring them down. It's good just to duplicate your nodes, reuse them as much as you can. I'll duplicate this one, and I will set this to Manhattan, and we'll set this one to Manhattan as well. And we're going to use the UV, keep all that the same for now, and I'll plug this in here. And I'll show you what this looks like. So look at this one, right? This is what's going on here. It's stretching it out. Now, if I take this distance value and plug it into the vector of this second one, look at it, we suddenly get this really cool kind of high-tech looking thing going on. Now, if I plug this distance into my color ramp, I can, using constant, right? Just like we did up here, there's no fade between the colors. It's a harsh difference between the two of them. And now I can have this, I can get these really nice, like defined panels. So what I can do now is I can take my scale, and I'm going to bring my scale way up, way up, because I'm making this I'm really making like a fine, dense pattern that I'm going to use. This second one can make things even denser. And I think this is going to be pretty good. Now I'm going to feed this in to this. We're going to mix these two together. So I'm going to grab a mix RGB, and I'm going to take the color from this one and the color from this one. I'm going to switch this to multiply these colors together. And I'll bring this in now. And now what I can do is I can use this to affect how much this secondary one is going into the system. I might even want to try add. Could give me a better look. Yeah, I think add works a bit better. So you can see it now at play there. It's really giving us this nice breakup that looks very, Death Star techie. Now I can use the same system in my bump. So let me grab these guys, move it. I'm going to create a normal map. Sorry, not a normal map. I'm going to create a bump node, and I'll take this one and I'll plug it into the height. And then I'll take the normal and plug it into the normal. It's going to be way too intense at the start. But if I just drag this strength right down, so it's nice and subtle, it's just going to give us a little bit of texture. And we don't want too much because the Death Star is so big that you're not really going to notice all that texture. Next thing we want to do is get that trench in place. Now we could do this procedurally with some nodes, or we could just save time and just grab the edge and loop cut, or just grab that center loop and hit Control B to bevel. I just want to make sure I don't have a modifier in there. Yep. So I just hit Control B to bevel. I'll just drag it out ever so slightly because this trench is like tiny. And then what I can do is I can hit E to extrude. I'm going to go to make sure I'm on global, and I want to go in, but I don't want to go up. So I want to restrict the movement just to the X and Y plane. So I'm going to hit S and then Shift Z, and that's going to turn off scaling on the Z. And it's just going to allow me to scale on the X and the Y. So I can bring this guy in, and I'm just going to bring it in like just the tiniest amount, right? Just a little bit. And now we're getting this weird shading effect, right? And we need to clean that up. We clean that up with some loop cuts. So I'm just going to click here and drag down and Control R to create a loop cut and drag up. So having double edges like this, you can see here we've got this double edge thing going on. That really helps Blender know how to shade things. So now we've got this nice trench and it's working really well. Let's also let's play with our material settings a little bit too. So I'm going to take the metallic up, and I'm going to take my roughness way up for the Death Star, and my specular as well. I'll bring that up. And that looks pretty good. That gives me the right kind of look. We want to make sure this thing's really rough because it's not going to be reflective. It's not like a, reflective marble in space. It's got this really strong diffuse lighting that happens on it. The Death Star 2's got this great construction stuff going on. And we're going to create kind of a simplified version of this look. It won't be exactly like this, but I'm trying to teach some concepts here that I hope you get a hold of that you can run with. Death Star. Dun 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 da da. Just move all this stuff up here. So this is our color system. Now what we're going to do is create the breakup of the construction. So to do that, we're going to do basically the same system as this. So what I'm going to do is I will grab all these guys and I'll just Shift D and bring them down here. Okay. We want to create. First off, we want it to kind of be going horizontally because you can see here that this construction pattern it's kind of these horizontal lines. There are bits that are going vertically, and we could go really complex and make a shader that does all that. But again, I just want to pass you guys the concepts so you can run with this in your own projects. So let's get this oriented in the right direction. So right now it's up and down. So in order to get this going the other way, we just need to change our scale. So I'll switch this one to 6.8, and I'll switch this one to 0.2, is that it? Yeah, 0.2. So now it's going the other direction. And let's go ahead and take, let's see. I'm going to take this and I'm going to switch these guys, one of these to black and the other one I'm going to make white. And then I'm also going to take my scale and I might drag it down a little bit so that it's not quite so small. And now these are going to form our construction layers. But we don't want the whole thing to be under construction, right? Now I'll show you the trick that we're going to be doing. So we're going to be taking this, right? And we're going to be piping it into the alpha channel. Now, if you're not familiar, an alpha channel, basically, wherever there is white in an alpha channel, it's fully opaque. You can see it. If it's black, it's transparent. You can't see it. In Eevee, to get that to work, we need to come over here to our options and switch our settings. Over here, blend mode from opaque to, I usually go alpha blend, but alpha blend actually isn't going to work very well for us because it doesn't show you the other side of the object. really clearly, and you've got to use backface, and you get this bizarre tearing effect where you can kind of see this line through things. So what we need to use is alpha hashed. That's actually going to give us the look that we want. And I'm going to take shadow mode, and I'll do the same thing, alpha hashed on the shadow mode. Now, but we don't want this whole thing to be transparent, right? We want to have a section that's under construction and a section that's complete. This is the complete, that's the under construction. So what we need to do is kind of cut out this shader so that it's not over the whole thing. We just need it to be over like this bit here. So in order to get that kind of control, we need to use two different things. We need to use a gradient texture, okay? So gradient texture is going to create a gradient from one side to the other. And we don't need to use, we can use the generated one that it uses automatically. I'm gonna grab this ramp and I'm gonna set this to ease. And now we can kind of control where it's at. And then I also wanna take a mapping node. So I'll shift D, actually I'll just start fresh with a fresh mapping node. And I can plug this into the vector. Now I need to use the texture coordinate. So even if you're using the default generated coordinate, you need to have this node if you start using mapping because it just doesn't work. And now what I can do is I could hold down Shift and drag and just kind of, get this thing lined up in a way that kind of matches the overall look of this the construction on the Death Star. So we kind of want just this part to be under construction. Now we don't want any construction on the eye. So I'm going to take this chance to go ahead and come over here, and I'm going to take my eye and I'm going to click the little paper icon. That's going to make this a new material. So now this is Death Star material.0001. I can call this Death Star eye material. And I'll just go ahead and stop previewing that shader. And we're not going to use this system for the eye. We're just going to leave this as is for the eye. And I also am going to unplug the alpha there from this guy because we don't need that. So we can just delete this whole system from the eye. So, okay, we're going to come back over to this shader. So now we need to use this to basically cut away this, right? So we've got this one, we've got this one. We need to combine them. So let's go Shift A, and we're going to go Mix RGB. And we need to do it in such a way that the black area is going to mask out this. So get rid of it, basically. So what I can do is I can use the multiply function, because if you multiply anything by 0, you get 0. And black is the same as the number 0. So I can plug this in here, turn my factor all the way up. So now it's only going to be on this side. So I can now position this a little bit. But it's also not going to be a perfect gradient, right? Because you can see we get these like sections, these like chunks. So we can further affect this by adding in some noise. So I'm going to add a noise texture. And what I can do is I can insert this noise texture, I can insert it here. If I grab a Mix RGB, I can insert it into the, I'll turn all the way down, plug this in here. I'm inserting it into the vector information that's helping to place this texture. So you can see as I drag it up, it's going to slowly break up that gradient texture. So I can just do this a little bit and then maybe take the scale down. And that's going to just break this guy up a little bit so it's not completely a completely straight line. But I don't want a lot of detail in it. I want it to kind of be a bit wobbly like this. There we go. Now, there's one last part we need, which is we need to have sections that are completely gone. So this is our sort of under construction zone. And then we've got the sections that are going to be completely gone. We also need to invert this because white, remember, with alpha channel means we can see it fully. Right now, things are kind of backwards because right now it's saying this is all going to be invisible. We don't want that. An invert node. And I'll just stick it here at the end. And now, as you can see, it's inverting things. So let's go ahead and have a look at what that's like in the alpha channel. So I'll bring this over to the alpha channel and we'll just have a look back at this. You can start to see what's happening. We're starting to get this really cool transparent zone. Now we need to increase it. So I can take, let's see. I can bring it out a little bit. And bring this in a touch. All right, so now we've got the ramp that's breaking this thing up a little bit, and we can actually then break it up even further and create even more of these kind of intricate construction zone areas by taking the system that we built here, this Voronoi system. So I'm just going to take all this, I'm going to grab it all, I'm going to Shift D, and what we're going to do is take this down here and use this system in the same way that we're using this noise, actually. In fact, we might even be able to replace the noise. I'll just have a look. So I'll drag this into here. And what this does is basically it's taking this gradient node and it adds even more of the construction stuff in it. And so it kind of breaks it up. I'll show it to you directly. So if I turn this off, right, it's just straight gradient. But as I begin to introduce this in, it's distorting the UVs or distorting the texture coordinates with this system that we've built, so that it's very it's got that same breakup. All right. Anyways, so come back over here, look through that. All right. Now we need to cut away some sections. So what we can do is we can take a noise texture and get rid of this. And so I'm going to go Shift A and I'm going to create a noise texture like that. And let's just have a look at this guy. I'm going to take my scale down and I'm going to grab one of these, drag it here. So we can do a color ramp just to kind of make it really a bit stronger in the contrast. And drag this down. You can see we get these nice, like, kind of curved sections again. And what we can do is same kind of thing here. So we can take another mix RGB and a texture coordinate and a mapping node, just like so. Generate it into the vector, vector into the vector. Let's move these guys down here, just to get a little bit more room. And this mix shader, I'll drag this over here. And what we can do is we can do the same deal we were doing before. So drag this in here, take this distance and pop it in here as well. So now this also has that cool system to it. And then what we can do is we can move it around, and we're just looking for creating a sort of a black area. Change up some of this stuff here, something like this. And now what we can do is we can take this and multiply it in with this system. So it's going to cut out even more. So we come right to here. Now we have to think really carefully about what we're trying to accomplish here. And we need to basically take this system, because we like this breakup. We like this big black area. We're going to have transparency. This is all working really nicely where, we're going to have construction areas kind of coming in and intersecting. And then we've got this bit, which is going to say, look, this is the bit that we want to have solid. I'm going to invert this guy. So I'm going to grab an invert node, pipe this into here. So now this is inverted. And now I can grab a mix RGB node. And I can take this system and this system, and we're going to add. Now, when you bring this add node in here, you just need to clamp them, and that way you can get pure white out here. Otherwise, you're going to get sort of super values, numbers that go above 1 or below 0. But if we clamp it, we're just restricting everything to 1 and 0. So if we get anything that's kind of over that, then it works out okay. So anyways, now this system right here becomes the one that we want to use for our alpha. So I'll bring this into the alpha, like here. And I can get rid of this. And we actually didn't end up using that. We got it to work with just this system here. So that's pretty good. Now let's have a look at it. So now we got this nice big kind of open area in our shader where we've got the construction that's going on. And we can further kind of refine this and get it to look good now that we see it. I'm going to jump into my camera and we're going to come here and I'm going to just play around with how these things are all mixed in. And now all these sliders kind of become the way you can control the effectiveness of this illusion that we're creating. Okay, so we got this cool construction system going on. Now we need to have the internal area, because I actually have these like levels, right, that are being built inside. And I can't resist. I gotta show you how to do that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come over here, we're gonna Shift A and create a plane. Scale it up so it's larger than our Death Star. I'm gonna come over to modifiers. I'm gonna add an array modifier. And I'm gonna move up on the Z. Actually, I'm going to go constant offset. Let's jump into shaded mode so we can see it. There we go. Constant offset, and we're going to go up maybe, I don't know, 0.9, less than that. Let's bring that down a touch. I'll just drag this up till it covers our Death Star. Now I'm going to create another array modifier, and I'm going to go constant as well, and I'm going to go -1. Drag that down. Just basically duplicating that whole system, but sending it in the opposite direction. Move it a little bit so it's kind of even, and yep, that works. All right, so now we have a bunch of planes, right? Now what we can do is, let's just go ahead and apply these. And let's create a new material for this. And this is going to be our levels. I'll go into shader mode, and you might be thinking, how on earth are we going to get constructed levels in a Death Star with something like this? Well, let me show you. We're going to go to our Death Star material, and we're going to copy our handy dandy Voronoi texture. Come back over to the plane material here. Find our node group, paste it. Oops, there we go. Bring them up here. Leave those guys there for a second. We're going to grab a gradient texture, and we're going to switch it to spherical. Okay. And I'm going to Shift D, and I'm going to put the object coordinates into it. And then I'm going to grab a color ramp, pipe this into here, and then I'm going to take this and stick it into the alpha. And then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to turn on alpha. We'll try alpha blend for this one. And alpha hashed, let's say. And now what I can do is I can drag this guy in. I can switch it to constant. And now look at that. This gradient texture lives in 3D space. So by applying it on an object that has different levels of 3D space, it's actually just using the coordinates of every part of this to shade that sphere. And by using it on our alpha channel, we basically have created this like leveled sphere thing that fits perfectly inside our Death Star. How cool is that? Now we do have to kind of bring it down a little bit because of that it popping in the eye. We might want to like drag it out on the X just a touch so that it, feels like it works proportionally. But now what we can do is we can also then take this system right here, come here, Shift D this color ramp, pipe the distance into that, stick this into the base color for this guy. And now we've got the same basic system. We need to change the scale because it's way too small, but you can see it working there. You can see all that happening. Could we rotate it? No, we'll keep it at 45. And I could also drag this around. Can increase that scale up maybe to 7 or something. We can play with that anyways until we can get basically these cool constructed zones for our Death Star. Now we can't quite see it. It's too small. It ends up just appearing like noise. So we can get around that by bringing down the scale on this. Until it looks about, just looks interesting. There we go. So we got those levels. Now we can even go further than this. Grab all these guys, drag this out, grab a noise texture. And we can use this noise texture to break up the levels even further, right? So I can come here and I can Shift D, pipe this into the factor. We can go for a mix RGB. And I can switch to multiply and pipe this in, turn the factor up, and then bring the scale down. And you can see what's happening is that we're actually getting sections cut away. So now we've got some areas that are under construction and some areas that are not. And it's fully transparent. I also want to take this off white and black because I feel like white and black is just a bit too strong. Something like this. Increase the metallic up and the specular maybe make the floors really rough. And we could also give it a bump, which is a good idea. Add a bump, and let's grab this guy here, pipe this into the height and into the normal. Actually, we might need this one. That's right. So we want the color, the base color to be driving that bump. So now you can see we're getting like these little bumpy sections, which is pretty sick. I could probably use a bit more detail in terms of the alpha channel. Like we could easily pipe in the system that we have here, the double Voronoi, into that to add to even more transparency and get that going. In fact, why don't we just have a look at what that looks like right now? If I was to look at that, I think it's this one. I think we just need to multiply it in. So if I just grab a second multiply node and drag it there, it's now going to include this in our transparency. So yeah, you can see it gives us just a little bit more breakup. We could also take this off of UV and stick it to, let's see, possibly object, which will give us different noise patterns on each floor. I could take this and move it around a bit. Now it is sort of a bad idea to do a color ramp for color and for alpha because white and black affect things differently. So if I should probably turn this one up to white and plug this into here. And then this one can be our color for it. That way we can make things dark without affecting the transparency overall. And I'll come back over here to this guy and maybe adjust some of these values. I should probably finish it off by parenting that and parenting this to that. Right, like this. There we go. And then take this guy and we need to rotate him like that because it's the Death Star. But let's finish off our scene. Go to shader editor, go to the world, and grab a let's see, a volume scatter. Make it a little bit blue. Density down to 0.01. Anisotropy down to negative 0.978, something like that. Go over to my 3D viewport. And now I can take my little point light, grab it off to the side, crank it up to 1000. And I've got that nice little ambient glow kind of going on. Make it a little bluish. Grab it on the X maybe so that it's affecting like the backside. Find a nice little shot for us here. Always add in some kind of volumetric light, even though it doesn't make sense logically. The effect of it is really worth it, I find. And also throwing in little bits of color into my sun lamps. All that does a lot to really kind of boost an image. So you can see how it really like helps to break out the image from that background because space is so dark. You can always keep one of these in the shot as well, you know. Okay, so I tweaked the image a little bit to try and get a really nice, final render. And but I came across some other really cool ideas that I just wanted to share quickly. So I thought I'd record again real quick. So things really haven't changed much from where we left off. But what I did do is I ended up taking the scale of our texture here, the one that's creating the breakup, and I scaled it on the Y a whole lot more on the mapping node, and it really gave us this really nice look. So it was around let's see, don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like this. It was much smaller, right? It was more like a boxy texture, and I had this scale was a lot bigger. That's how it was. So it was like this, right? Which kind of looks a bit noisy, but by making this really big, dropping down to like scale of 3, and then taking the Y scale on the mapping node and stretching this all the way out to where I was, which was about 100, just ended up looking a lot nicer, a lot more like, actual construction sections. That was really nice. I'll just take that back to what it was. Yeah, scale of 3.2 and then a Y of 100. And then the other thing that I did to really kind of increase the overall dramatic impact was I added into the planes, the plane object that's creating the inner levels. I went into that and I added, where is it? Just a simple noise texture, the scale of 200, piped into a color ramp. And I made the color of that color ramp a real bright blue, and then I took the vibrancy up to 5. And just kind of played with these a little bit to kind of cut off that noise. And I just put this emission noise across the whole object. So we got these little pinpricks of light now inside the Death Star. It just really, really made it look so cool. So I just really wanted to share that with you. Yeah, and then just to kind of highlight what was going on, I just brought that blue light that we had just behind here a little bit. Just it was just lightening up this area to like bring that out compositionally. I thought it looked a lot nicer. Yeah, there you go. And I tweaked my sun lamp, rotated it around to the other side. That's all I did to get this final look. Also, too, one other thing that I did do that you might notice is I was getting the little kind of hard edges around my center eye. So actually what I did was I took this object and I turned off shadows in the material properties. So I took my Death Star eye, I went into here and I turned off the shadow mode, set it to none. And then I scaled it up a little bit. So it's actually sitting a little bit above the rim, and I added a subdivision surface modifier just to this object. So now it's nice and smooth, and it's kind of hiding the more ugly kind of, notched edges of that background shader. Anyways, hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you learned some really cool tricks. Actually, you could push this a lot further and really try and get it to a place where it's like spot on from the movie. But you can see all these things are working together to create some really nice effects and give you a really cool, interesting result. So anyways, good luck with your project. Hope you have a lot of fun messing with these skills and playing with this stuff on your own. I will catch you in the next tutorial. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you later.